In this segment, we're going to be talking about a pretty serious topic. It is the fall from grace, or the original sin, as many pastors or Bible teachers teach it. We're going to be discussing Genesis chapters 2 and 3, which includes the tree of knowledge, the temptation of mankind, and the fall of man, or the original sin. Genesis 2:9. The tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So remember, God created a man and wife, Adam and Eve, placed them in the Garden of Eden, and here it lists two trees that are in the Garden of Eden, and I placed them in green for you. The tree of life, the other tree is called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now you can just call it the tree of the knowledge or a tree of knowledge, but let's call it the tree of knowledge of what? Good and evil. Until then, I'm just telling you, there was only good. I really believe that God created Adam and Eve to live forever. I think they were perfect. Perfect. Do you know that Adam lived to be 930 years old? Let me say that again. Adam lived to be 930 years old. And the Lord God commanded the man, Adam, saying, "You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat." So let's back up for a second. Why would God do this? Listen, let's go back to the concept of free will. Free will is something that is given to everyone by God. God does not force us to love Him. He doesn't force us to obey Him. Remember, my concept of the Bible is that throughout, God tells us what to do, and we either do it or we don't. And if we do it, we're blessed, and if we don't, we're stressed. God, for instance, tells you don't steal. But if you decide to steal, that's your free will. You decide to do that, to commit that sin, and sometimes you're stressed when you steal. Am I correct? In this case, here's the consequence for this one thing that God is telling them not to do. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Now we know that Adam didn't die on the spot, and Eve didn't die on the spot when they ate that fruit from that tree, but it introduced sin into mankind, so mankind would die. Remember, Adam lived to be 930 years old. He was perfect. It doesn't say how long Eve lived, but she was perfect too. But eventually man would die because of this fall, the fall of mankind, the original sin. And it's called the fall in the Bible, by the way. This is Genesis 3, starting at verse 1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. Now who is the serpent? The serpent is Satan. And remember, we discussed Satan for you briefly before, but Satan means accuser or adversary. Remember that. The word Satan means adversary or accuser. Satan was the archangel Lucifer, which means giver of light. He was a top angel, and he was once a glorious angel who fell from grace when his pride caused him to want to be equal with God. And he took a third of those angels with him, the fallen angels, as we call them now. So Satan was originally Lucifer, and remember that Satan means adversary or accuser. Satan was cast out of heaven, and his main goal is to keep mankind in sin and away from God. Here's the story, Genesis 3:1, the fall. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God has made. He said to the woman, did God actually say, "You shall not eat of any tree in the garden"? And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, 'You shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden,'" that's the knowledge of good and evil tree, "'neither shall you touch it, lest you die.' But the serpent said to the woman, 'You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.'" So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of it its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. Opinion time. Remember I'll tell you when it comes an opinion, everybody. My opinion on how Satan works throughout history. First of all, he creates doubt. Remember, the name Satan means adversary or accuser. He is God's adversary first and foremost. He doesn't want you to be godly. He doesn't want you to follow God's rules. He wants to create doubt. And the way he does this in this story is he says, did God actually say that? Think of your Eve. You have this serpent talking to you from this tree, and he creates the doubt by saying, did God actually say that? Now, those of you who have studied this story before in the Bible, you know that when Jesus first started his ministry, he went out into the wilderness to be tempted for 40 days. And when Satan came to him and talked to him, the first thing he said was, if you are the Son of God, I want you to do this. He tried to create doubt on Jesus himself by saying, if you are the Son of God. So in Genesis, he says to Eve, did God actually say that? Then he creates temptation. He says, Eve saw the fruit of the tree was a delight to the eyes. He's saying, look at this, would be so nice. It'd be so nice to touch this tree and to eat from it. And then he lies about everything. Do you know Jesus had a nickname for Satan? He called him, how'd you like this nickname? He called Satan the liar and the father of lies. How good do you have to be at lying to be the father of lies? Here he tells Eve, surely you will not die. So this is just a commentary. Here's some application for you. Sorry, as a pastor, I got to put this one in. This is how he works all the time. Satan does. He, for instance, will try to tempt you to, let's say, commit adultery. And he'll say, do you actually think that this is going to be bad for you? Do you think this is going to be bad for your marriage? He creates doubt. And then he, of course, makes the object look delightful to your eye. Of course, that's your temptation. And then he guarantees you that you're not going to get caught. And that it's going to be good for your marriage in the long run. And you can take any sin in the book. That's how he works. He creates doubt, he creates temptation, and he lies to you. And then when you sin, he accuses you because he's the accuser. So what happens next with Adam and Eve? Adam and Eve committed the original sin, and they had several punishments, including they were evicted from the garden. The other punishments involved for Eve, she had to have pain in childbirth, and apparently before they committed the sin, childbirth was not going to, be painful. So, boy, darn it, right, women? And then for Adam, he would have to work hard, to toil, to work the land, according to the Bible, to grow anything. So before they committed the sin, apparently things were just going to grow on their own. God was going to provide everything that we ever needed, and there would be no pain in childbirth. Boy, that was... Anyway, Adam and Eve had many children, many children. There's a few listed. We're going to talk about Cain and Abel next, in our next segment. And Adam lived to be 930 years old. Here's our summary. All people, including Adam and Eve, were created with free will. They ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which God told them not to do, and they were evicted from the garden as a result. Adam and Eve had many offspring, and Adam lived to be 930 years old. Are you ready for a quiz on Adam and Eve? I hope so. Here we go. How did God create Adam? I'll let you think about that one. Number 2, how did God create Eve? What tree did God forbid them to eat from? How was Eve convinced to disobey God? How many years did Adam live? So that's our quiz. Let's go over the answers real quick for you. I'm going to go back one here. I am not starting over. Okay, how did God create Adam? He breathed life into him after creating him from the dust. Did you remember that? How did God then create Eve? He took a rib from Adam and he created Eve from it. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh is what Adam said. What tree did God forbid them to eat from? That's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. How was Eve convinced to disobey God? By the serpent, Satan. He made it look really good. He tempted her to do it and said she would not get in trouble. What a lie. How many years did Adam live? For the 8th time, or for the 930th time, he lived to be 930 years old. That's our segment. Please tune in for the next one. Thank you.